Good afternoon. I'm Alan Bird from Hair Elements Products. I'm back again with another exhibit. This is going to be Exhibit E. Exhibit E is called the perfect storm: frequency, misclassification, and statistical instability. Now, on the prior episode, we talked about the henceforth thing. How did relaxers even get mixed up in all of this lawsuit and cancer controversy? We talked about how the NIH leadership unilaterally, without any authority, decided to rename relaxers and recategorize it into a totally different category. So what we're going to do today is put that together with other things that they did that really made it a perfect storm. Historically, frequent use in chemical relaxers was defined as 7 to 10 times applications per year, consistent with salon practice. Every 6 to 8 weeks, this was the standard in Black women's health study and other culturally informed research. So what I mean by that is that generally all the other epidemiology studies in the past looked at frequent use as 7 to 10 times. Then you had moderate use, which is like 4 to 6 times, and you had, little to no use. So they turned around and took the frequent use at 7 to 10 and reduced it all the way down to 4. So anyone that knows about relaxers, if you think about it, okay, do you think a person getting a relaxer 4 times a year, that's once every quarter, do you think that is frequent use? No, it's not frequent use. It's kind of stretching if you think about it. The average person would say, if I went with a relaxer, if I stretch my relaxer out 3 months, I got a lot of new growth. And I got to be very, very careful because, as you well know, the way relaxers work, if you take too long, you can end up damaging and getting a lot of breakage. So 12 weeks to be considered frequent, it's a stretch. But in 2019, NIH epidemiologists went against over 4 decades of cultural norms and prior studies such as the Black Women's Health Study and unilaterally reduced the threshold to under 4 times a year, equal to under 4 times a year, barely once a quarter, and roughly 2 hours of exposure per year. By lowering the bar, women who occasionally had exposure were suddenly counted as frequent users. The definitional change inflated the frequency category, diluted the true dose response effects, and manufactured hazard ratios that sounded alarming but were not culturally or scientifically accurate. Number 2, it's the thing that got us here: misclassification of products and tools. Remember last time we said they added keratin treatments with relaxers. Well, here we go. The NIH collapsed chemically distinct products such as sodium hydroxide and Brazilian keratins with formaldehyde under one umbrella term called straighteners. Okay? They stated explicitly in 2019, this is from the study, and we'll read it in quote: chemical treatments used to permanently or semi-permanently straighten or relax hair, henceforth referred to as straighteners, contain a mixture of chemicals, including formulations in which carcinogen formaldehyde is present. That's Herbal, White, and Sandler. The authors admitted this is why their findings differ from the Black Women's Health Study, which examined relaxer use in the 90s and 2007 and found null associations. So again, we have to be able to read. Of course, they had to cover themselves by not totally stating it. But I think that they bet on the fact that we wouldn't read it. Because if you think about it, why would you include those in one bucket and then turn around and say that, well, the reason we got this positive finding is because we included 2 things in the one bucket? But you include it in the file so that just in case somebody like me, an industry elder, a cosmetic chemist, someone who is going to read, finds it. And at the worst case scenario, they can say, hey, We put it in the study. We didn't lie about it. It was in there. But if no one reads it, the narrative continues. And that's why it's so important for people like me who have responsibility to our industry to tell the truth, read what's said, and call them out when we need to. This is, to me, one of the most damaging things anyone could ever say. Listen to this here. The discrepancy may reflect changes in chemical formulation of popular straighteners between studies. Historically, active straighteners included sodium hydroxide and thioglycolates, which are not considered carcinogenic in humans. In the early 2000s, Brazilian keratin treatments, which contain formaldehyde, a known carcinogen, were introduced to the global markets. But again, let me stop there because this is, guys, formaldehyde is not an estrogen blocking ingredient. As I stated in my last episode, I'm continuing to research. This here, all this research you see here, over 115 pages, 30,000 words. It's literally a Bible. I'm continuing to research, and as I reach further and study further, more and more things are coming apparent. This is crazy because all the stuff about formaldehyde, I found out formaldehyde isn't even an estrogen blocker. So why are we talking about formaldehyde now? Formaldehyde produces a type of cancer that's dealing with the nasal because it's inhalation. It's not going through your skin and blocking certain hormones. It's not a hormone blocker. It's a skin type cancer. So it has absolutely nothing to do with everything we're talking about. So every time I hear a lawyer, or every time I hear a supposed industry expert talk about, well, you know, it has formaldehyde. Formaldehyde has absolutely nothing to do with estrogen dependent cancers at all. If you don't believe me, Google it, ask ChatGPT, they'll tell you the same thing. So despite this, the NIH proceeded to lump relaxers and keratin together. Then later, again, when they didn't get the response they wanted, they expanded the category further and added non-chemical pressing tools. Think about that. If you're natural and you've never had a relaxer, but you soot press your hair, if they ask you that question and you would some way got uterine cancer, and you answered yes on that questionnaire because, yeah, I flat iron my hair. I've used a flat iron before. I've used a straightening comb before, but you've never used a relaxer or a keratin treatment. You answer yes to that. I'm asking you a question. Can a flat iron block hormones? Can a flat iron cause cancer? No, of course it can. But it's included in the category of straighteners now. You can't make this stuff up. This guaranteed misclassification bias, merging safe products with a known carcinogen and unrelated tools, then presenting the entire category to the public as it represented relaxers. So again, the next storm, number 3, statistical instability, small samples and wide confidence intervals. Now guys, I went back to college in 2010 after my mother passed away unexpectedly. I think it was my way I wanted to cope. I had to cope with me losing her. I've always loved science. I've always loved, math and that type of stuff. Been fascinated with it. And one of my favorite classes I took was statistics. It just fascinated me because you had numbers. There's a way you could tell everything with numbers. And this is one of my books. I held on to it. Elementary Statistics. And the one that I really, really love, Quantitative Analysis for Management. It's one of my, courses I took when I went to JU. These two statistical books, I just remember, confidence intervals and, why you have to have the proper sample sizes and, because those things can lead to off numbers, can lead to false findings and false readings. So the first time I heard that the sister study, I loved it in my quotations, the first time I find out that the sister study was actually about sisters who had cancer, not black women, first I'm like, oh man, that was a sleight of hand or a branding thing. I know he didn't intend to do that, but I'm hearing sister, I'm thinking black women. They said sisters, they're saying sisters in general, and come to find out the population of the sister study for the uterine cancer and all these prior ones in 2021 and 2019 had 86.7% white women, only 7.4% black women. Now, just from a layman's standpoint, what would that tell you? If you have 86% white women and only 7% black women, that's not even the population average. What kind of numbers are you going to get? Well, for black women and postmenopausal subgroups, the NIH admitted that they had to estimate hazard ratios because the sample sizes were too small. This produced hazard ratios with wide confidence intervals that stretch from potential protective effects to extreme risk. So a CI confidence interval, that basically says, how confident am I that these numbers I have here are correct? And depending upon how large a sample size you have, that confidence interval shrinks. It shrinks. The smaller the sample size, the wider the gap. Okay? So you could have a HR, which is a health risk, HR ratio of 1.66 with a confidence interval of 95%. But the interval could be from 0.67 to 4.09. That could mean a 33% lower risk or 309% higher risk. That's a wide gap. You don't know where in between there, and you could be anywhere in between there. That's happening. You have to estimate. Same thing with a confidence interval of 1.26 to 3.55. That could mean a modest 26% increase or more than triple the risk. In plain terms, these numbers are so unstable they cannot be trusted to guide public health decisions. Yet they are presented as definitive. Next is number 4, the false racial gap. The 2019 study, the associations for straightener use were the same across black and white women. Hazard ratios were similar, both weak and borderline insignificant, with wide confidence intervals. The only clear racial difference was permanent dye, which showed a stronger association in black women and essentially null in white women. But again, because of that small number of black women, even the dye one, it's suspect because there's only 7% black women in a pool of 86% white women. I think the whole overall cohort was like 49,000 women, and only 7% of those are black. It was only after the NIH expanded the definition of straighteners to include pressing tools, which were disproportionately reported by black women, that the exposure prevalence and apparent racial disparity widened. In other words, 2019, straightener risk, same across the races. Later studies, definitions changed. Exposure inflated for black women create appearances of racial disparity. The disparity was not discovered in the data, it was manufactured by shifting definitions. Remember I told you. Now that they included flat irons and pressing tools, you could not have had a chemical at all, but if you had a flat iron on your hair and you end up with ovarian cancer, you answered yes on that question. Think about that. Isn't that crazy? 5th, the pattern is called differential misclassification. Every methodological choice lowering the frequency definition, collapsing distinct products, including non-chemical tools, relying on unstable estimates, consistently worked in one direction: to magnify apparent risk in products primarily used by Black women. Meanwhile, products primarily used by white women, temporary dyes, highlights, no-lie perms, which are thioglycolate, were studied with standard definitions, stable samples, and consistently reported as safe. It's not a matter of conspiracy. It's a matter of systemic bias. In scientific terms, it's called differential misclassification, when errors in how exposures are measured disproportionately affect one group. So I'm gonna conclude with this here, okay? The combination of frequency redefinition, product and tool misclassification, and reliance on unstable hazard ratios created a perfect storm of junk science. That's just what I call it, junk science. The apparent racial disparity in risk was not supported by data, but was mismanufactured by shifting definitions. The NIH's own admissions confirm that relaxer chemicals, active ingredients, sodium hydroxide, thioglycolates, as well as calcium hydroxide, are non-carcinogenic, and no results were found in the largest Black-only study called Black Women Study when it was just relaxers. It's not politics, not victimhood, but it's the truth. And the truth is that the NIH's findings rest on unstable estimates and cultural misrepresentation and not sound science. So this is going to conclude my second of the three about this misclassification and just how we got here, because had they not unilaterally decided to group those three distinctly different things into one category, we wouldn't even be here. But I'll see you next time. God bless. Take care.